Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Just while everyone's kind of trickling in, we'll give it a few moments. Thank you for waiting in the waiting room. Much appreciated. So we'll get started in a few minutes, just waiting for everyone else to join us. I can see the numbers rising quite a lot, Sarah, so we've got quite a good number. We've got 119, 120. So that's a great number this morning.
That's great.
And hi everyone, everyone's probably saying hi in the chat, so that's fantastic. So we'll run through a few housekeeping rules. You're probably all kind of familiar with Zoom and housekeeping now, with a year of webinars and such. So welcome. We do have the chat box open. We've also got the Q&A box open. I will be manning those, and if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in there. And what we'll either do, if it's kind of a technical question, then I will answer typing wise. If not, we will get to it at the end, and I'll ask Sarah some questions on your behalf. So please feel free at any point to pop in any questions. The session is being recorded, so you can rewatch it if you want. You can pass it on to colleagues who aren't available to watch it at this moment, and we'll send a link out as well for you. And we also get a lot of questions around certificates. Yes, you will receive a certificate for attending the webinar. This will come at a later date as well. Now, I think the numbers are holding steady, and I've done my housekeeping spiel. What I'll do is I'll introduce myself and then introduce Sarah, and then we'll get into the session. So my name is Stacey Roberts. I'm the IPLS PD manager, and I work with lots of regional managers around the globe on professional development for IPLS, I-Primary and I-Lower Secondary curriculum. And my role really is to create professional development that will help teachers globally in teaching the IPLS as effectively as possible. So that's me. I will be kind of hosting and behind the scenes. And then Sarah, who is joining me this morning, she's an educational consultant specialising in teacher professional development and assessment. She was a primary class teacher for nearly 30 years and has held many SLT roles. She's been a head teacher in international schools as well. And then following on from her completion of her Masters in Education, Management and Leadership, Sarah now supports curriculum development and writes and delivers professional development in the UK and internationally. And we are both itching to get out and travel. So hopefully we can hold some of these sessions, maybe virtually, but from a different country maybe in the future. So passing over to Sarah. So thank you very much, everyone. Sarah, over to you.
Lovely. Thanks, Stacey, for that. And I hate it when you say 30 years. It always makes me feel so old, and I'm not. Thanks everyone for joining this morning. It's great to have such a fantastically large crowd online. So let's crack on, because I know that this is something that's really at the sort of heart of teachers. I've been working with a lot of teachers over the last year, and the big question is, that's great, but how do I cope when I'm online? So the point of this session is that's what we're going to have a look at. You know, it's 2020, it was March, so just over a year ago when our whole teaching environment changed, didn't it? Schools were closed, and across the world, we went online, including myself. And the learning environment online became the foundation of keeping our teachers and students connected and, importantly, learning. So most of the tasks you can carry out in your classroom can also be carried out online. It doesn't have to be the learning that changes, it's the online delivery. And I think this is where some teachers have struggled, because they've just taken what they did in the classroom and transferred it online. We can still use our face-to-face planning, but we really need to consider the technology and the online strategies that we're going to use to engage our students, that's key, and really keep them learning. So here are some outcomes for the session. We're going to really consider what these challenges are, and I'm sure you're going to fill the chat with questions about things that you've faced over the past year. The only thing I'm going to say is I haven't got a magic wand, and if I would, I'd share it with every teaching colleague in the world. But I'm going to hopefully give you some hints and tips as we go along, and we will look at developing that teacher-student relationship, things to really think about as well. I'm going to start with a poll, if we can, Stacey, and I'm just going to give you a moment to sort of fill that in.
Yep,
And it's just to get a gauge there, thanks Stacey, of how you're feeling about your work online.
We've got lots of
and these are anonymous, so don't worry, nobody's judging you here. It's just sort of, I think sometimes it's helpful for you. There's nearly 190 of us here today, and you can feel that, well, okay, I'm not alone here. No, they're still coming in, that's why I'm hesitating.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So I can see there, well, on the half, I would say probably about, it's 44% of people say they love teaching online, and that is superb. Delighted about that. And I think I'm talking to an increasing number of teachers who are feeling more comfortable in this environment. We've also got a very high percentage who I think I could do better. And do you know what? That's been my feeling throughout my teaching career. I've always felt I can do better. And I think that's a great place to be, because that's the reflective practitioner. That's the person who's always looking to improve. And of course, yeah, we do it because we have to. Stacey said we'd love to be traveling and meeting with you face to face. It's a completely different experience, but we haven't got that option. So actually, I have to work online. And I always feel when I'm working with teachers online, a little something is missing. And so I think I completely relate to teachers who've selected that one. So there's lots of different strategies that are available for us in the online environment, which we don't have in the face-to-face class. For instance, I've just used a poll there to gain a bit of feedback in the classroom. That's a great method. It's quick, checking for basic understanding, bit of formative assessment, use it at the start of your lesson, just to see what prerequisite skills the children have got, ensure they're paying attention, getting them to engage with the keyboard, and it's low stakes participation. Let's start off by having a think about what are our priorities when we're online. Now I can see I've got a very experienced crowd here today, so that's terrific. What are your priorities, have you decided, when you're online? What I'd like you to do is pop those in the chat. Now they're numbered, so if you just choose the numbers and put those numbers, I'm just going to close the poll down here off the screen, put those 7 numbers in the order that you think you need to think about them. So which order do you have to think about these priorities when you're working online? I'll just give you a moment to do that. Quick pick up here.
We've got some fives.
Ideally put, yeah, it's quite a mixture coming in here. Really interesting.
We have all of equally important as well.
Yeah, equally important. I'm actually going to show you that one really is, and it sits above all others. So let me just, there we go. Number 6. If you haven't sorted that out, nothing else is going to go well for you. You've really got to sort yourself out with the technical side, the technical tools. Now, they introduced me, I've been teaching 30 years. Guess what? Computers weren't even around in the classroom when I started. And that was one of my challenges. I'm not a techie, but slowly I've been filling my toolkit for working online with lots of different strategies and knowledge. And a lot of that is through attending webinars on YouTube, talking to colleagues, learning from my colleagues. So teachers often focus very much on their physical online presence, and that is important. However, your technical ability is also really important, because your students are going to lose focus if the teachers can't find what they need online and they're fumbling around. So have your files prepared. This is basic. Have the tabs open that you need and close the ones you don't need. Hide your toolbars. Find out how to do it. quick Google search will show you. And be aware that if it goes wrong, students are going to pick up on your stress. So if you're playing with something new, have a backup plan. The next one is number 5, building that trust and relationships. This is the same as face-to-face. If we haven't got this sorted, then students are not going to learn as well. We all know as teachers that if they love you as a teacher, they actually do better in that subject. And that's because you're more interesting to them, you're more charismatic. So we need to spend time online, not being content curriculum driven, but just focused on building up relationships. And that is putting some of your lesson aside, particularly when we come to September, we have new classes, to build up that relationship. You need to have a human online persona. You're taking students into your home. So maybe if you've got a dog, I've got one asleep on the floor behind me, introduce them to your students. And then every lesson, maybe they could just say hi to the dog or keep it as a sweetie at the end of the lesson. If we do really well today, I'll get Red online and he can say hi to you. All part of building up that relationship with your students. And remember, personalise the learning and treat them as individuals. In your planning, if you're using a face-to-face planning, and I'm sure many of you have realised this, we need to strip it down and probably work on fewer objectives. So look at your planning and think, what are my key objectives here that I'm going to work on? And also be clear about what are my success criteria? How am I going to judge that my children have actually achieved this? Because that's quite hard to see online. So you need to have an activity whereby you can make that judgment. And that leads into developing your content. Keep it simple. That's going to be my mantra, to be honest. Keep it simple. Ensure your content is shown with clarity and the expectations are there as well. You make that clear to your students. And we'll think about that a little bit later. I see a lot of teachers sort of working with a whiteboard, but it's not very clear to the student. Think about how you're presenting the work to the students. And we mustn't forget our assessment. Formative assessment online is as important as it is in the face-to-face classroom. It needs to be going on all the time, and it can be more challenging online. So we need to think of activities and strategies that we can assess what the students have learnt and understood. Maybe a quick response in the chat box, maybe a poll or a quick quiz. There are things out there in the free space such as Padlet, which is great for assessing, understanding and learning rather than the test. Providing feedback. We really need to, assess progress. I jumped there, didn't I? In the face-to-face classroom, we need to keep a check on our students' progress. It's the only way we know what to teach next. Otherwise, we're just teaching the next thing because it's in the book or it's in the curriculum. Actually, we know what to teach next because we've assessed our students' progress. And we can only do that if we've got clear objectives with clear success criteria. And these should be designed as building blocks so that we can assess the students' progress as they move through the blocks. And we need to give our students feedback. All the research shows that effective feedback motivates students. Grades, numbers don't, they're demotivating. And we need to make sure our students know what they've got to do in the next online session to improve. So maybe we give them some feedback between our classes, maybe a quick email to our students. If you're interested in feedback, Ron Berger is the person to go to. Also, you may have come across Austin's Butterfly if you've done any IPLS training, but it's free out there on YouTube. It's superb. About being kind, but highly specific in your feedback. So let's move forward and think about what are the challenges that we face. I'm just going to give you a moment there to share in the chat maybe your personal challenges that you face that Stacey can pick up for me as well. I'll keep an eye on it. And thanks for everybody who's building up the in the chat. And it's lovely. I can see here, I'm looking at some names and I recognise them, which is fantastic. Hi, everybody I've worked with before. I do recognise some names. Yeah, getting the children's attention. And that's come up a couple of times, hasn't it? What to do with the shy, introverted child as well? Low attention span. Yeah, distractions. You're not alone. You know, these are pretty universal challenges to all of us online. And believe it or not, I work with adults a lot of the time. I have been teaching online, but you know, that's the same for adults. You've got to get their attention. You've got to keep their attention. You've got to stop them being distracted. Adults in a large conference room can get their phones out pretty quickly if you're not engaging. So let's have a look at what some of those challenges are. We can see the technical. That was very much a big challenge when people started out online, but that engaging students is still there. It's been a challenge from the start, and I think it's still there, along with motivating our students. And then covering enough course content. That's a big concern for teachers. I'm going to sort of give you my mantra on that one in a moment. And difficult to meet the needs of those individual students. And then time. Time runs away with us. If we reduce our objectives, that can help with time. And then here's the bigger list of our learners. The technical, sometimes at home they haven't got the devices and then don't like working online. Let's have a look in a bit more detail at some of these. Well, the technical, the teacher, check your internet and your strength. Do a speed check, just Google speed check, and do everything you can, whether or not it's actually plugging straight into your internet, but try and overcome that your end. And for the learner, that might be something you've got to talk to your SLT. That I know UK schools have been supporting the learners with giving them devices. Maybe that's something your school has to take over because you can't deal with it. So don't feel you have to cope with all of it. But on the technical side, maybe it's about getting a microphone. Maybe it's about getting a headset. I've got one here. If I've got interference, I quite often use my headset. Also look at your platform. Zoom has a great thing. If you dig down into the settings, you can stop that background interference. I got it switched on so that if my dog starts barking, it won't be as bad for you as it is for me here in the room as well. Also check your video. Make sure that your lighting's good. Stacey and I were talking about lighting just before we started. It's something you really, focus on. All those YouTubers have a special light. I haven't got one, and I'm in quite a dark office. A background really helps. And with little ones, or even if you're a chemistry teacher, get a photo of your chemistry lab from school and have it in the background. Your teachers feel like they're actually in the classroom. You don't want them. I don't want you poking around my messy office when I'm talking to you. So I'm in a Pearson office and I think this is Hong Kong, isn't it, Stacey? So think about your setup. Be confident on your platform. Practice it. Don't be overwhelmed with it if you're on a new platform. I've been using something called Bramble, completely new to me. I've started off using a couple of key things and then slowly adding on one extra thing at a time. So I'm using the basic features and slowly building my confidence on the platform. Zoom, I'm really happy on Zoom and I can do backflips on Zoom. So when you're moving to a new platform, start with the basics and slowly build up your repertoire as well, and talk to colleagues. Find out what colleagues are doing. If they don't mind, share a recording of what they've done and then ask them, well, how did you do that? Move away from your distractions as well and get your students to do that. My big distraction is my dog, but I've spoken to him and he's now okay. He wasn't when I first started working online. But make sure that, I've got a notice on my front door, not to ring my front doorbell. I'd have a notice on my door. Don't knock on the door and come speak to me when I'm online. At the right height. Make sure you're framed really well. I talk to teachers in training and they're in dark rooms. I can't see their faces. That's really hard for me to get all that non-verbal from them. Sometimes I'm just looking at the top of their head. Sometimes I'm just looking at them from the nose up. Really make sure that you have got yourself well set up, because that will help you engage with your students. and it will keep them with you and their attention span. I've got my laptop on 5 books here, and I've got it marked out on my desk where things sit. So all these things need thinking about, and your time management does as well. Remember, try and do less, simplify it. Explain things slowly as well. Do slow up online. Sometimes we get overexcited as teachers, we talk quite quickly. Really slow it up, and maybe practice what you're doing. If you're going to try something new, practice it. If you're in Zoom, you can try it and record it. But establish a routine to your lesson. And this is really, really important. Doesn't mean they're going to be boring and repetitious, but have a clear, familiar structure. So start with an icebreaker, something fun. A starter activity you can have on the screen while children are logging in. Something fun, doesn't have to be linked to the work they're doing. Have your main teaching, have a short, maybe practical activity, and then a review and reflect at the end. And think about the ping-ponging in the lesson, handing over to the children, coming back to you, the teacher. Keep your lesson simple. I just keep saying that, don't I? One objective achieved well is better than lots of objectives not achieved well. And think of all the functions you can use. Diversify, vary your presentation, keep the structure the same, but vary the presentation. Maybe even pre-record a video. Find a video that you can use on YouTube. Share a screen, a whiteboard. With little ones, have puppets, have prompts, have flashcards. But make sure you've got the technical expertise to use these. And also finish on a high. Make sure your lesson finishes on a real high, because guess what? That's what students learn. And if you want them to log in for your next lesson, make sure they left that lesson feeling, God, that was good. I enjoyed that. So don't try and do too much, especially with younger children. And I know some of it is about behaviour. These are the things that come up. So establish a netiquette code. Like you'd have a classroom code in your classroom, and you'd agree that with your students, and this is going to be great for September. Get them to establish a code of conduct for working online and call it the netiquette code. They can work on it in your first lesson in small groups and share it. Get them to put it in positive language rather than don't, but we will. When we're online, we will not use bad language, keep our cameras on. And you can add some of the problems you face and say, okay, well, this is what I find. How can we put something in our rule box that actually meets that so it doesn't happen? And come back to these at the start of your first lessons. I would say even for the first 5 to 6 weeks of teaching, refresh them with your students and keep coming back to them. And, you know, this lack of engagement. I'm being slightly more animated than I am in real life. And that's because when I'm online, my energy is sapped by about 20% by the online environment. So you have to have more cadence in your voice. You have to emphasize things a lot more. So use the pace, use your cadence of your voice as well, but stop talking and get your students talking. This is a webinar, this is more of a lecture, but normally I get the students talking. I'm giving them prompts as well. And embed those active learn strategies in your teaching. So in science for healthy eating, I'd ask them to bring to the session 5 objects, 3 that are healthy, 2 that aren't, and get them to do some research and be prepared to explain why. I wouldn't go through all 5 with one child, but I would pick from each child. 3D shapes, get them to find a 3D shape in the house, and they can play a game. What am I? And guess what the 3D shape is. And remember, lots of praise and encouragement. Think of your growth mindset. You're praising and encouraging the participation rather than whether or not they get something right as well. Make sure that them participating in your online lesson really is noted, and that's what you want as well. So, and this is quite scary. Take some feedback at the end of your lesson. Ask your students, you give them a little form, send them an email with a little form, or give them a poll, or ask them to rag the lesson. Red, didn't think it was very good, amber, or green, actually it was a good lesson. Really important to do that. And then have that honest discussion. What do you like to be doing in your online lesson? And that will help you gain their attention and their engagement as well. I can see lots of questions coming in. We will pick those up at the end. So let's think about overcoming some of these deeper challenges as well. Once we've mastered the technical, it's really about building up that relationship online. And if this is your area of challenge, though, in the face-to-face classroom, it's not going to go away online. And all teachers have to work even harder at it. So what might some of those challenges be? Well, they don't turn up for the session. That's, you know, quite a big challenge there, really, because you haven't got them there. Rather than assuming that this is non-compliance, find out what the reason is. And you might have to do that quite gently. It's our job to get to the bottom of why they're not coming and support them then in resolving that issue. Don't assume it's not just non-compliance. It might be anxiety. It might be lack of support at home. It might be technical issues. There's only one device in the house and the sibling needs it. And each of those is going to require a different strategy, and it may require the help of your senior leadership team. This was in the chat, doesn't participate. I would talk personally to a child about that and find out why. By doing that, you're straight away showing the child that actually their participation is really, really important in your session, and you value it as a teacher, and it worries you that they're not doing that. They might not be clear about what you're asking them to do. They might be anxious about others seeing their work. Finding out what the issue is can help you find the solution. And it might help to write the instructions down into easy steps for that child. You could email it across before, breaking the task down, giving them a little bit of space in a breakout room, whereby it's just you, another child, a smaller group, to encourage them to overcome their shyness. Shyness is a big thing online. And, you know, even adults feel anxious as well and vulnerable in this environment and reluctant and want to see others participate first. Some children, younger ones particularly, or teenagers, won't like all the eyes looking at them as well. And then therefore might be a reason for that camera not coming on. And maybe you just have to respect that to begin with as well. But build up on that relationship with that child. Arrange to meet them on a one-to-one. And I'm going to put a big caveat here, within safeguarding guidelines. Meeting children online needs to be done within safeguarding guidelines. So record it, that meeting. You should never meet a child online without it being recorded. And find out what their hobbies are, their pets are. Get them to realise online with you as a classroom is a safe space as well. Maybe they're just not interested. Teenagers tend not to be. So find out what interests them and build that into their lesson. The inappropriate behaviour is the big one, isn't it? And there I'm going to go back to the netiquette. Remind them of expectations, and also remember you are in control of the mute button. You can mute all, and you can turn the video camera off, and you can record it. Your session should always be recorded. You can record it to play back to them, and in a one-to-one, maybe probably with senior leadership, have that conversation of, how do you feel about this behaviour? I think that was appropriate, as much as you would in your normal class. If we don't complete the tasks between the sessions, probably going to be the same child that's doing that in your face-to-face classroom. They probably don't do the homework either. Have a personal conversation with them. Maybe reduce your expectations and reduce the task and find out what the problems are, but set clear expectations of what you want them to do. And then we've got the other end of the spectrum, the child that dominates the online session. What do we do about that child? Well, try the 3 before me rule. And that is that once they've contributed, 3 others must have contributed before they can have their go. And just remind them of that as well. But remember, we do want student voice. That's great. I can still see questions coming in the chat that I'm sure Stacey's grabbing there. You know, I mean, the bottom line is that Teaching online is the future, and we've been pulled into this way of working incredibly quickly. And unfortunately, in many countries around the world, we're not sure how long this is going to carry on for. Some here today might face meeting their new class online in September, and you've got to build up that relationship, and that's going to take time, more time than usual, but build it into your lesson, and not just your first lesson and not just the first week. Keep it going and refresh it as you go through the year. Before March 2020, I'd never trained online. I'd done everything face to face. But since March 2020, over a year now, I can't believe it, I've done over 1,000 lectures and online webinars and workshops, working one-to-one consulting with schools. I think 400 and about just under 500, between 450 and 500 has been my biggest audience online. This is now my future normal. I know that. I'm not going to travel the extent that I used to. And it's been important for me to embrace it and treat it as the same as you did when you first learned to teach. I went right back to basics. I look back at some of my early stuff online and I probably will do a cringe. And I'm not saying I've got it right now, but the most important thing is keep reflecting. Keep watching yourself on video. I listen to recordings, not too much of them, but a bit of them. And I watch myself. I'll probably watch 10 minutes of this, 5 minutes and think, well, what could I have done better? And I always ask Stacey, she'll say, oh, it's great. But then I think, no, what would you have done differently? And get that feedback from colleagues as well. Embrace that technology. Really go out there and find out what you can use. Find out what a colleague's using that's working well for them. And just think, well, can you show me how to do that? That sounds great. And don't be too hard on yourself. Teaching in the classroom isn't easy, and teaching online is even more challenging, but I think there are great opportunities. I join in on other webinars, not to learn about what they're talking about all the time, but if it's somebody I'm really interested in, actually see how they do it. I watch TED Talks. There's some great tips you can learn from TED Talks. So there's a lot of help out there as well. Just going to very briefly move on to a slightly different area, and that is how we plan our lessons. We need to think about, are we going to be synchronous at the same time? So you are there with your students in the classroom, it's all happening live, or is it going to be asynchronous, whereby maybe the activity be set online. So you send them a recording of the teaching part of your lesson. And I know our Maths Progress International has some great videos, and they're the teaching part. You can send those to the students to watch at home in their own time. They can then watch it slowly. They can watch it a number of times, or you could do that. You could record the teaching, the modelling part of your lesson and send it home as homework before your lesson. Watch this, and in the lesson, we're going to talk about it and discuss it and do the more interesting stuff with it, the active learning. Maybe in your session, there's going to be some semi-synchronous time, whereby the students are sitting and they're working independently, or they're in pairs. They're not engaging with you, the screen. And I think the important thing to remember here are that many of our lessons are about 45 minutes to an hour long. And it's important to plan that time really carefully, allocating time to each part of your lesson, so you have a clear structure, and vary between synchronous and semi-synchronous, or build in some asynchronous to your teaching as well. Make sure you've got good pace. Think, would I be bored if I was the student in this lesson? Do activities that alleviate screen fatigue. Give them a moment where they can do something on a piece of paper over here and they're not looking at the screen the whole time as well. And reduce your content. So remember, for most of your students, teaching synchronously for an hour is a very long time demand to their attention. And that's why actually this, I'm going to stop talking in a minute, because we've worked out that over the year that about 35 minutes is about the right time for an adult to listen to another adult in a webinar, with a little bit of interaction as well. So remember, a couple of key objectives as well. My mantra here is always slow down the teaching and it speeds up the learning. And I keep saying that in lots of my courses, and I know my colleagues do. But if you have that at the back of your mind, fewer objectives, slow down the learning, and it will slow down the teaching, I'm sorry, and it will speed up the learning. Don't be content driven, be learning driven. Now, I think it's a good time there, Stacey. You said 35 minutes. I think we're spot on. I'm going to stop there at 35 minutes. I'm going to leave the next slide up, just some help notes there about planning our synchronous online lesson. And it's, you know, things I've said already. And Stacey knows I'm a big advocate of the flipped classroom as well. And I could talk to you now. I could go on for 3 hours, really. But I think it's a good time to stop and take some questions.
Yeah, of course. We've got some absolutely fantastic questions in, and it's great to see. So I opened up the Q&A box so everyone could see questions coming in. It's great to see that other people have liked other people's questions. So obviously that resonates,
that's really great.
Resonates with more than just that one person that's asking that question. There's a lot of questions around, or comments around, parent participation. And the one question is, how can, I think the biggest one is, how can we reduce parents' engagement in Zoom classes?
Okay, do you know what, this is where I'm going to have to talk about flipped classroom, because I think this is where this is your ace card. If you send home the modelling part of your lesson, so let's take maths as an example, whereby you're explaining how to do something, or in English, you're maybe doing some grammar, explaining how to do something and giving some examples. Why don't you film yourself doing that and send that home with a note that it's great if the students watch it with their parents? Because not only then, you're not stopping those parents showing the children a different way of doing it. You know, you're very focused on what you want to teach, but you're encouraging their participation. At the same time, I would then say to the parents, and I would put this in an email, that when the student is online, it is classroom time and time for them independently, and make that really clear that that is not time when you want them in the Zoom lesson. And your Zoom lesson at that point should be in the flipped learning classroom, where you are using what they've rehearsed or they've practiced at home. If you don't like the idea of recording, you could maybe send home a passage, an English passage that they need to read, and ask us some basic questions, like a homework activity or something you might have even done in class. Send it home and encourage the parent participation at that point. But then say, when they come back online, we will be working with this passage, and then the activity you're likely to do is to put them into breakout rooms, and they're going to be discussing, they're going to be doing more of those predicting and inference tricky questions if it's an English lesson, but make it clear that that is for your student to use what they've learned. Thank you for supporting them at home, but now this is time for them to really show what they can do. So I think it is about communicating with parents, but the flipped classroom does help that problem, because you encourage their engagement, but show them where the line is and where you don't want it. And you know, I'd be clear about the damage it's doing, but if you don't allow their students to become independent, and if they continue to, the phrase we use is scaffold them, hold them up, then what are they going to do when they're required to work independently in the test or the exam? So I think that's one way to answering that.
Yeah, I think it also then touched on a few other questions that had come in around how do we convince parents that online lessons are not less physical than face-to-face lessons? It's a tricky one.
Okay, what I would say is all of your online lessons for safeguarding should always be recorded. And I would say that, you know, if a parent asks me for a recording, then yeah, I would be happy to share that. You can edit your recordings as well on most platforms. Even in Zoom, you can actually cut them and take them into a third-party platform and edit your online, so that, you know, if there's lots of children and various things happening, you could take that out and have it focused on your part as well. But it's about you communicating this to your parents. You keep that communication really going backwards and forwards. That's all parents want. is be communicated with. You know, as my time as the head and leadership, that's the lesson I've really learned. If you don't communicate with them, they start talking amongst themselves and worrying. If you keep that communication coming, you can also, their questions are often just because they're concerned and they're worried. So keep the communication going, maybe share the odd recording, tell them as a school how much you are valuing this online learning, how great it is. I'm a governor of a school in the UK, and my school's been using Seesaw as its platform, and they've done the most amazing job with engaging with parents, getting certain activities they've done during their book week, for instance. They really got parents engaged and said, this is now your time to come online with your students. We want everybody involved. And they do mindfulness once a week where everybody's involved, on the basis that you're not involved in the maths lesson when that's happening synchronously online.
Cool, thank you. There's one question that keeps getting lots and lots of likes, so I think we kind of need to ask it.
Okay.
How can we get students to focus for a lesson of 2 hours online, especially at preschool and kindergarten level?
You can't. Okay, does that answer that? That is absolutely ridiculous. And this is where you go to your synchronous and asynchronous and think about it. Your lesson timing and timetable has to be planned appropriate to the age of the child. So a young kindergarten child in the face-to-face class has a low concentration span. So you need to spend, I would say, maximum for them 20 minutes online, maximum, and then give them an activity to do that they're not asynchronously without you, and then bring them back. If this is something that's dictated to you by your school, I think you need to really sit down with your phase team and your senior leadership and talk this through and say, look, this is what's working and this is what isn't working. We need to plan moving forward from the new school year. But a 2 hour, I mean, I struggle to keep adults online for, 2 hours, to be honest. We always have a really good break. If I do 3 hours of training, I'll try and put a break in every hour. And these are adults who are there, they've chosen to be there, they're highly motivated. It's a big ask for little ones.
Yeah, thank you. Keeping with the divided attention and attention spans. We have Rufus from Potter House in Nairobi, familiar name. Empirical research has shown that young students easily get distracted when using laptops due to the inability to manage divided attention. How should the faculty manage this when they're teaching online?
Yeah, well, you've got to build up that tolerance, and this is where careful lesson planning and activity-based planning. The research shows that if you get people to engage with, that's why I did a poll straight away. I get them to do something, and the thing that I tend to see most is, and I even see it in webinars that I attend, is that you join and then there's 10 minutes, 15 minutes of talking. You've lost your children already. So within 3 minutes, have them engaged in doing something, a poll, maybe an activity that they can do. Maybe how many words can you make from this word, something where they can be using their keyboard. And then depending on the age, as to how you put these building blocks in place. So you provide the distraction. Your talk, depending on the age, should never be more than 7 minutes, whatever the age. And that doesn't happen, I'm afraid. I see it secondary. I've seen a lot of recordings of secondary lessons and the teachers are just talking and talking. Of course, the students are distracted. 7 minutes and then give them something to do. And I would say you've got to build up to a 7-minute tolerance. So start with less, keep them active and use your active learn strategies. Use your breakout rooms, whatever capacity your platform has. Get them to watch a video. Shouldn't be longer than 5 minutes though. If it is, break it down into 2 sessions of watching. Really think about your planning. I hope that answers that. There are no magic wands to this. Yeah. It's about us as teachers reflecting on what we're doing.
Yeah, it's very tricky, and it's almost a bit, we had a conversation around this, didn't we, Sarah, a few weeks ago. It's almost trial and error.
It is, and watching what others are doing that works. And that might be them as a person. It might be some of the technical things that they're doing. It could be the planning of the lesson. But learn from your colleagues. Share best practice. That's how I've learned and developed as a teacher over the years. I haven't invented many things in my time of teaching. I've magpied and stolen from great teachers.
Yeah. What's the saying? Work smarter, not harder. Yeah. I think that's what I use. Yeah. Yeah. We've got a few more questions. I think we've got just a bit of time left. Obviously, don't want to take up too much more of everyone's time, given how busy everyone's lives are. We have quite a few questions around, should students attend, or should we make students attend with videos on or off, or give them that opportunity to turn on and off as they wish?
Yeah. I would normally say that they need to have their videos on. And I mean, I've got lots of caveats to this. I would always, and when I do training, I always begin my training in gallery view on Zoom, so I can see everybody. And I will encourage everybody to, I'll have an activity. It might be, can you hold up something that begins with C that's on your desk? Or I might describe what I've got next to me. It's got 4 legs, it's red. You know, can you guess what it is? Most people come up with a cat. Actually, it's my dog. And then I'll say to everyone, turns my camera on, I'll show you my dog, but he's not going to come out for people who haven't got their camera on. If they haven't, make a note and then have that conversation. Why? Don't presume it's non-compliance. And I think that's what I'm seeing a lot of teachers going, oh, they don't. Actually, there's usually a reason why. It can be bandwidth. I know in training, I'll get messages saying, really sorry, can't have my camera on, it's bandwidth. And I'll put that in the netiquette at the beginning of a training session. Look, I completely understand it. You might have to flick your camera off if maybe your 2-year-old suddenly jumps up on your lap during a training session. We're at home. So I would ideally encourage cameras on. Talk about, when you've got your new class, about positioning in the house. Where are they going to have this lesson? It might be that they're in their bedroom and they're a bit embarrassed. So just to say, that's fine. Best place is put a background up. So find a nice background. Put yourself in somewhere you'd love to be. And everybody can choose a background. Show them how to do that. Or put them in the corner of their room where there's just 2 walls meeting and there's nothing on the walls. Then they can't see. Maybe they're embarrassed by their home background or their bedroom or the room they're in. So think about, why isn't the camera on, and have the conversation. But I would definitely try to encourage those cameras on. And yep. I would, you know, yeah, lots of things there. I know some schools in the UK have insisted on children wearing their school uniform when they're online. I think that's got lots of benefits. I think, you know, there's lots of caveats to this, and it would be very dependent on your school. But I think it's about having a whole school conversation about it. And again, get parents involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, me and Sarah both have our backgrounds on. You would, if I didn't, you'd see my washing in the background, which obviously no one really wants to see that. So it just provides that nice kind of thing to look at as well. I think we've got time for 2 more questions. But what I will do is I'll make a note of everyone that's asked the question, and then I'll create a FAQs post, which will either be sent via email or we'll put it on our blog page. But yeah, we'll have this 2 questions I kind of really want to ask, and then we'll kind of finish. So the first one, which I've now lost because everyone's pouring in with questions. Bear with me. Okay, how can we assess student progress and make sure that they're doing their work? So this is all about assessing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's building informative assessment. Thinking carefully about the strategy that you're going to use for your formative assessment. It's about listening to your students, giving them a lot of time for student voice. Once you get them talking, if they're working, let's say in pairs or threes in breakout rooms, and you jump into those breakout rooms and you start listening to them, you are assessing what they know and their progress. And a few key questions can judge that, or a formalized activity. Think about how you're going to do it. But yeah, your formative assessment rather than the test, I would say, because you need that to know actually moving forward, you know, what do they know, what do they understand, because that helps you plan your next lesson. Even just a quick quiz sometimes will do that. But there's lots of strategies, KWA, L, you know, everybody give me a question that they'd like answered. You know, what have you learned today? But what would you like to know? That will actually tell you quite a lot about what a student's learned in that lesson. There's a lot of strategies, and we cover those in our training, don't we, Stacey?
Yes, we do. And yeah, I realise I've put them into daily practice without really knowing it, which is fantastic. But yeah, yeah. And then there's one final question, which I think is a biggie, and I think it's getting towards the end of the school year, and obviously we've been training, teaching online for 9-ish months. So how can teachers avoid burning out? Do we have any advice?
Wow. Yeah. And I'm completely with you on that, because, you know, I have meetings on Zoom, I work on Zoom, you know, some days I've been doing between 6 to 8 hours a day online, and that is exhausting. So think about your students, that's exhausting. If they're EAL students, they're doing it in another language, that is exhausting. So try to do less. And in terms of yourself, if you plan carefully, keep it less. Don't be curriculum content driven, be learning driven. Don't panic about getting through the content for the exam, because what we're learning are transferable, we're teaching our transferable skills. It's not just about knowledge. If we are teaching the transferable skills, then actually the students learn the knowledge a lot easier. So focus on less as you get more burnt out, and try and do it better. It's hard. The children of students are burnt out as well. It's been a tough year for everyone.
Yeah, so kind of take it easy. Take time for yourself.
Absolutely. Build in some fun activities to your lesson. Start with something fun, end with something fun, and, you know, keep it varied, but keep the pace and keep your structure. If you've got a structure to work with, then you're not reinventing the wheel every time you do a lesson.
Yeah.
You're just putting it into your structure, but using a variety of different vehicles.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you, everyone. And I think on behalf of the 241 participants we had at one point.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. Thank you to Sarah for this fantastic session.
Well, it shows how important it is, you know, and it's great that I can see so many people have really embraced it as an environment, and we just want to do better.
Yeah, indeed, definitely.
Hopefully most people are coming up for a holiday at some point. They can take that time to reflect, do a bit of their own research, and learn some new, so I call them tricks and flicks for the new school year.
Yeah, so thank you very much. It's been a great hour. So just a few more housekeeping before we finish off. There was a few questions around special needs students. We do have one of these webinars, how to teach SEN students online, booked in for the 16th of June with Alan Yeoman, who myself and Sarah work with very closely. Absolutely fantastic. So the registration's open for that. You'll get emails and newsletters coming through to sign up for that as well. Again, anyone that participated or attended the session will receive certificates. Again, they'll be sent through via email. What I'll do is I'll stay online for another few minutes. So if you do have any other questions, pop them in, because then I can make a note of them and I can get them answered for you and popped either in an email or on a blog post. But once again, thank you. Thanks to everyone for turning up and staying engaged and all of your fantastic questions. And thank you to Sarah as well.
And we've got the podcast as well, Stacey, haven't we?
Yes,
coming up.
Yes, that was a note to Megan. I've completely forgotten about that. So IPLS has a podcast, and myself and Sarah recorded a episode a few weeks ago, all around the flipped classroom. We were going to talk about a little bit, well, Sarah was going to talk about a little bit about the flipped classroom in this session, but we thought it might take up too much of your time. So there's a 20-minute episode which will be available later today on the podcast. Again, I will send the link through via an email, so you can obviously listen to that as and when you wish. More episodes will be available as and when they are kind of made available. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll pop the link into this chat box as well now. As I said, I'll stay on for a few more minutes if you've got any more questions. But yes, you need to check out the podcast and sign up for the webinar in a few weeks' time. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, and thank you to Sarah. You're all free to go if you wish.